And we're live. So welcome to the emotional roller coaster of repetitive strain injury. We have two guests here today who are going to be discussing various emotions that can be experienced during certain stages of RSI. And I hope that you will also chime in with your comments and questions, just observations. But before we begin, I thought I would give you sort of an overview of the things that I've noticed after 3 decades of working with RSI. And I'm going to put up a slide here. So here we have the emotions of RSI. And the reason why I did it this way is because I think in general, people tend to have similar emotions as they go along. And there are various stages. I'm going to be talking about some. This is just my observations, but I think it's kind of ballpark. You'll tell me what you think in the comments. But RSI brings up a lot of different emotions in people. And we're going to talk about some of the common ones that people go through. And in stage 1, people know something is wrong, but they don't know what it is. And possibly their doctor doesn't know what it is either. You know, their hands feel weird. They're losing grip on things. They're getting numbness and tingling, weird sensations that go away. But then, they suddenly realize that they can't use their hands normally, and it can be very unsettling, deeply unsettling. And when this happens, people often put off going to the doctor because, as I said, the symptoms get better periodically. And, they take the weekend off, they feel better. But then eventually, in many cases, the symptoms stop going away and they could get a lot worse. So then a lot of people go to their massage therapist or their acupuncturist, and both of those things are fine. But what you really need is a good diagnosis and medical treatment in addition to that. And they're hoping that that will turn things around so that they can keep working, sort of fix things on the outside and just keep going. And then when they do see a doctor, because these things aren't working and they don't know what's going on, they're often very disappointed that the doctor doesn't seem to know anything about repetitive strain injury. And they might say, I can't use the computer, and the doctor won't see the interaction between the computer and the person's injury. And they may not know anything about repetitive strain injury or what to do about it. And there's also, in this stage, I think, this is just an observation, but I think people can get into magical thinking like, if I just imagine this, that I'm not feeling pain, it's going to go away. Or if they also get into this bargaining, and I'm sounding like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross here, but, if I take X number of months off or X number of weeks off, then I'll be fine and I can go back to work just the way I was. So that can happen, I think, in stage 1 as well. Then we get to stage 2. And at this point, people can, actually, we're not in stage 2 yet. We're still in stage 1. People can panic. And there's this growing anxiety in the pit of their stomach as they're looking for some sort of answer. And this can lead to desperation, which leads people to do anything, try anything, a lot of things that they find online, which could be completely unhelpful, if not injurious. And here, people are looking for quick cures, and those kinds of things can get them into further trouble because they put off the time when they could actually be getting medical help, something to restructure the scar tissue or teach you some biomechanics or some exercises that will help your posture and that kind of thing. And then fear is really common at this point because people may feel like they're never going to get better. That would also go along with sort of a sense of hopelessness. And they just feel like they're never going to find answers and what is going to happen now because it's your job. And then we get into stage 2. And that's when people are lucky enough to get a diagnosis, but nothing seems to help. So after consulting with the doctor, or more often several doctors, I know people who've been to maybe a dozen doctors, people can experience a whole new raft of injuries. injuries, but also emotions, because RSI tends to build on itself because you're making compensatory and substitution movements. So now instead of just a little bit of carpal tunnel syndrome or epicondylitis, tennis elbow, you've suddenly got thoracic outlet syndrome on the other side. And, these things happen very frequently with repetitive strain injury. So once they've been diagnosed and things that they're trying don't seem to help, people can get very frustrated because maybe they've been in physical therapy for a long time. And maybe it's helping them, but sometimes people get worse because they've got an inappropriate exercise program, or they're still working at the same workstation that put them in the awkward position that got them into trouble in the first place. So a lot of things can lead to frustration, and the frustration can often build into anger. There are a lot of people who are very angry about RSI, and it's understandable, but it's also a very strong emotion that can trigger a lot of symptoms. I mean, sometimes people just think about using a computer and they start having pain. But when nothing seems to help, or they can't find a doctor who diagnoses them properly, or their employers or workmates or significant others or friends seem to expect them to get better because they are all having all these treatments, and they overhauled their workstation with expensive new equipment, but nothing seems to be doing the trick. It's not curing their repetitive strain injury. And the other thing about anger is that people can stay in anger for a long time. And I don't know, it's a strong emotion. It can lead to your symptoms coming back. But it does have one value, which is that it can propel you. You can use the energy of the anger and direct it somewhere else, like to keep searching, or to do political activism or something, something constructive with the energy that you might get from anger, which, if you can do that, I think it's helpful. When I was working as a personal trainer, I had a client who was pretty angry about something, and I would put her on the exercise bike, and the angrier she got, the more she would pedal, and the more these wonderful things were happening in her body, because she was getting the blood flowing, the circulation going, oxygenating her brain. It was really wonderful, warming up, burning calories. I mean, it was a great thing to do for her. So anyway, back in stage 2, when you've been diagnosed but nothing seems to help, depression is very common. And that's really hard because people can sink into these very deep depressions, and it can be really tough because a lot of times the people around them don't understand. They don't have RSI, so they don't understand how all-encompassing it can be. And then in stage 3, you're finally diagnosed well, and you found treatment that helps. You found a really great physical therapist, or you found an acupuncturist who really seems to know what they're doing, and you've overhauled your workstation, and things are better after much searching. And you're able to regain a little bit of pain-free hand function. You're learning how to deal with it. And this can lead you to optimism, which is a great feeling. But it's also a little tricky, because when you start feeling better, you can also go galloping back to things, like overdoing it, or not taking your breaks, or forgetting about your exercises. And then you can backslide or flare a little bit. So you have to be careful. But the good treatment and the physical therapy is usually accompanied by avoiding the activities that cause the injury. But this can also mean that people are out of work because they can't do repetitive things with their hands, or their hand function is very limited. And because people are out of work, they can experience anxiety about the future. How are they going to keep working if they can't use their hands? Or what if the only job they can get is way below the salary they were making when they were working at their previous occupation? There are vanishingly few jobs that don't require some sort of hand use. And I have a video on that I think both of you have seen. So if you are severely injured or have previously been injured, this can lead to relapse and the worsening of the RSI. And this is another tricky thing. You can get better and you can keep working, but you're still using your hands in a repetitive way, and that can lead to further injury down the road. So it's tricky. Then in this stage, people can also achieve mastery. They reach a stage where they're able to work within their limits without relapsing or overuse without pain. And there can be a sense of relief and stability. They've got it. This is a really good place to be. It might take many years, but people who deal with RSI successfully find a sense of acceptance, contentment, and the knowledge they can be happy and have a full life, even if they have RSI. So those are basically the 3 stages I thought of, but also I want to include long-term RSI, and both my guests, Alexandria Carstens and Howard Egerman, have had this for 3 decades, as I have. So I think that we should talk about long-term RSI because I think we can develop other random emotions, and I'm sure all these emotions can happen in other stages than I mentioned, but one of them is resentment. I think even the best of us, can feel a little resentful when other people don't appreciate what it is to live with RSI, even though they have no clue. I mean, it's not their fault because they don't have it. Guilt, and I think Howard's going to talk about this later. Many people have expressed feeling guilty because they can't do the things they used to do before they were injured, such as baking Christmas cookies or housework or carpentry around the house or lifting something or getting that stuck window open. Maybe they even feel guilty because they can't hold the door open for somebody else or they can't drive anymore. Those are all important functions. And then there's envy. I don't know if other people feel this, but sometimes I look at people who can use their hands freely and, open jars and do all this stuff. And I just feel like, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could do that? It would be so nice. So I get a little nostalgic. And then I think there can also be a sense of shame, helplessness, or inadequacy, because it's not unusual for people to feel helpless or inadequate because they can't do what they used to do or be as helpful as they want to be with other people. And I think also, before we close today, I'd like to talk about some of the ways where we want to encourage people not to get overwhelmed or feel hopeless. So I'm going to introduce our wonderful guests here. Let me add Alexandria. Hello, Alexandria. And Howard. Let me get you.
Oh.
So I think we've got everybody.
And Deborah, if I can just mention one thing that I did. This is 1999, and Bill Clinton's OSHA head, Charles Jeffers, was proposing an ergonomic standard. And I wrote to my union sisters and brothers because I was going to testify, and I testified at Portland, Oregon. And I said, well, how does RSI affect you? And this is where I was most moved. One woman who does the same job I did wrote me and said she felt a failure as a mom and a wife because of issues dealing with cooking and cleaning for her family. And that got me extremely upset. And I just mentioned when I testified that one thing we have to realize, we may not be able to do our job in terms of dealing with claims and typing and everything else, but we're going to have to deal with our families. And what hit me with RSI is some of the issues can actually deal with the issue of sexism. In other words, if I don't sweep or if I don't open up a can, I'm just a strange, uneducated male. But if a woman cannot do this, she can be seen as a failure. And that really, really upset me a lot. And that's one of the things that I testified about, is that, you may not be working, you may be on workers' compensation, but you're still going to have to deal with your family. And I thought a lot about what you said, Deborah, in your first book with Dr. Pasquarelli, this chapter called Your Emotions. And, that's how I think it really applies. And when I recommend your book to people, and I recommend your book all the time, I think everyone should read your books. I always go to the chapter, Your Emotions, and mention that. But I just want to put that out there because I was truly moved with that woman's testimony. Letter to me. And it was interesting. The person who cross-examined us ended up being later on the Secretary of Labor, Eugene Scalia, who's the son of the Supreme Court, late Supreme Court Justice. And he called it ergonomics a silly science. But in all seriousness, the emotional impacts are really strong, and I really felt upset about what that sister told me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Alexandria, do you have anything you want to add?
In that regard?
Or any regard?
Oh, any regard. Envy. Envy. That is my weakness. And I see people who just without thought, of course, going about their daily activities, and they can do all these wonderful things that I can't do anymore. And yeah, I hate to say it. Envy is kind of my bane, as it were. Not all the time, but sometimes. And, or especially if someone has the capacity to use their physical selves in a certain way and they don't, and I just think, gosh, if I could, if I were like that, I would be able to accomplish so much. I guess an example would be people who just can't be bothered to clean the house, right? And, we all get there, right? Understandable. And I think, gosh, if I could clean my house, I'd be so happy.
I'm so glad you brought that up because you don't know how many people have said, I never liked to do housework before, but God, they're watching the dust bunnies collect under the bed, and they're thinking, oh God, I really need to clean the grime off that, or I need to wash, clean the windows. I know someone who tried to clean her windows and flared herself. So she had to get back into treatment.
Of course.
She just wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up.
It's horrible. I used to love cleaning the house. I was one of those strange people, but but you let things go. Like for instance, I used to always fold my towels a certain way, always, put them back on the towel bar a very specific way. I have a little OCD anyway, but I let that slide. I just don't care anymore about that because, it's where do you put your hand energy?
Exactly.
And it's like that really in the long scheme of things does not matter.
Gotta conserve the hand bank.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I just want to mention one other thing too, and that is, when you're a little kid, one of the big things is being able to tie your shoes. And what really bothered me was I couldn't tie my shoes. And we had for a while, Deborah spoke at our RSI support group, and a person said to me, look at the shoes these kids use nowadays. They have Velcro. So what I did was I use RSI shoes, Velcro shoes. I don't have to worry about lacing them or tying them or anything else. But I think too, in terms of trying to so-called master RSI, I don't think I master, I cope. But I use Velcro on my shoes. And that may seem a simple thing, but I felt so depressed because I said to myself, here I am, I think I was 50 then, a man of 50, and I can't tie my shoes. What a failure I am. And then when I realized that these little kids, the next generation, are using Velcro, and I can use Velcro too, and nobody's going to really look at your feet, you know. But I think that's one way of dealing with it, because I went through all the stages Deborah mentions and Kubler-Ross mentioned in terms of getting depressed. I was really depressed, you know, anger, just really, I can't tie my shoes. But then right now, I always use Velcro. And now I watch these commercials for Skechers, and they're showing people just going right in their shoes, even these people without RSI.
Yeah.
So I just want to just make, I mean, that's just one of the examples, because again, I think one reason Deborah is so spot on in her books is, you know, we may not be able to work, you know, this is only my 50th year of work, so I like to work, but I'm hopefully always going to be able to wear shoes. And, you know, that's one way of dealing with my RSI is Velcro. So I want to just mention that's an idea that they mentioned, you know.
Well,
and
Howard,
for, yeah.
thank you for once again showing how you deal with it so beautifully. That's one of the reasons why I'm happy that you're on today, is because, you know, rather than crying that you can't tie your shoes, you found Velcro. You thought, I can do that. But you also brought up another really important point. And this applies, I think, to men more than women. I think there's a sense of, I don't know how to put this, but helplessness. And, you know, a lot of times a woman will go to a man and say, could you open this for me? If he's got RSI, he's probably not going to be able to open that jar for someone else, because people assume certain things, you know, and men do have, you know, bigger muscle mass, which is why it's typically easier for them to open stuff. I mean, I ask people to open stuff for me all the time when I'm not making videos on how I've had to try to figure out how to do it another way. But yeah, you know, there's a sense of diminishment. And I think that's really another important thing to bring up when we're talking about the emotional aspects of repetitive strain injury. And also, I just love your way of taking the bull by the horns and finding a solution. I mean, you've got your bus pass because you can't drive. You know, this kind of thing is it's a really great response, because, you know, you found solutions that work for you.
And it's those little victories that make all the difference, I find. It's, you know, that emotional roller coaster you talk about. You can be just so devastated that you can't do something. And then when you find a solution like Howard did, oh my gosh, it's that one, you've got to cling to that moment of triumph, and, you know, and then tackle the next thing. And, you know, there are some things we do have to let go, and it's awful, it's devastating. And, and no matter how long ago you let things go, it does crop back up. And, you know, certain activities I used to do without thinking, you know, 30 years ago, I can't do now, and it's still, you know, but yeah, when you find those solutions, it's just, you've got to cling to that joyous moment and ride that wave, hopefully, as long as you can.
Yeah, we've got some comments coming in. Here's one from Exploring Canada. Let's see if I can show it to you. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that you have RSI yourself. I wish it was limited to only a couple of people, you know. This is just, people have no idea how devastating it is. And I work with a lot of people with RSI, and my clients, and one of them had to go back on disability leave from her job, which she loved. And her employer is just trying so hard to keep her, you know, in her job. And she emotionally, she just kind of went down a spiral, and so now she's off, and she doesn't know when she'll be back. And it's just,
yeah.
Yeah, we have another comment here from Coffee Cup saying, for anyone suffering with RSI, keep going. You know, you talk about beating it and playing guitar and using computer again. And, you know, a lot of people do that. They get a little better. And I'm not saying that you can't get better and do those things, but it's kind of a slippery slope to think, you know, because in the beginning, if you aren't seriously injured, you will be able to do your previous activities. But I think, you know, going on, you got to watch your posture and just think of the amount of use that you're putting your hands through every day. So I think we all need to be really cognizant of using our hands and our hand energy wisely once we've been injured, because once you've been injured, it's game changing. You know, it's very difficult to get back after a certain point when you're in a certain stage of the injury, which is most of the time when people finally realize they're injured, they're in stage 3 of the injury, where it's very difficult to turn things around. So, you know, just everything you do, be careful of your hands and be careful, you know, pay attention to any symptoms that you might have, back off, maintain your exercise program, your posture, and all those other things. Because one of the doctors that I know compared trying to stop repetitive strain injury to trying to stop a freight train. And I think it's kind of, it's like that, you know, it's a very, very serious thing to try to get over. So is there anything else that I haven't mentioned that you guys want to bring up?
Well, I can mention one thing, because you mentioned about my bus pass, and I also mentioned my keys. I wear a lanyard because one of the things people don't realize, you have to reach for things. And it was a lot of problems for me trying to find my keys. And sometimes, because I'm older, I might forget where I do my keys. So what I ended up doing is wearing a lanyard, and I wear a lanyard for my favorite football team, which is sadly moved to Las Vegas. But what I do is I wear them. That way, when I need to get inside the house, I just get my key. And when I need to get my mail, when I get home from work, I get my key. And then when I go on the bus to go to work or go to the store, I just reach for it around my neck. So I try to look at simple things so I don't do as much reaching, because I strongly believe in what Deborah said about the hand bank, the use of my hands. I want to use my hands primarily when I work so they can save some usage by wearing a lanyard or wearing my BART bus pass. I will do that. So I want to just mention that. And to some extent, what I've done is I've gone back to the past and when I was a little kid, because we used to wear our meal tickets and put safety pins on our clothes. So I'm actually doing the same thing as a senior citizen. But I think that's one thing that you can do to deal with RSI. So that's what I do. Is I wear everything, and it's easy, and you know, I try to save how much I use the hand bank. So I just want to mention that to Deborah. But that's another great thing everybody should read in her books, the hand bank. I love it.
That's in my second book. Thanks for bringing it up. And we have another comment from Exploring Canada. And she says, good point. Everything is good until it isn't anymore. And thank you for saying that, because I don't want to take anybody's hope away, you know, but at the same time, my mission is to prevent the injury in the first place, and also to help people not make it worse by doing things, you know, because it's amazing what people will do. You know, they're doing all these wacky stretches. Stretching is really not good for you if you have RSI. As one of my clients said, he says, you know, if the tissue is damaged, why would you stretch it? You know, it just doesn't make sense. So the goal here isn't to take any hope away. The goal here is to try to, not make things worse. And
it's that spiral, right? Like Exploring Canada said there, everything is good until it's not.
yeah,
Right.
And, I mean, the three of us and so many others have had RSI for so long, and, you adapt, right? And you feel good about that adaptation in your life. You don't think about it day in, day out. And then all of a sudden you do something or a series of things that puts you in a relapse because you just had to get something done or do something. And then you curse yourself and you get angry at yourself. And that's what happens. I get very angry at myself. And I think, why did I do that? Why? Well, I know why I had to do it. And then that spiral of negativity really puts you in a tizzy. And
I'm so glad you brought that up. I interrupted you. Go ahead,
oh,
Andrea.
that's okay. And it's so hard to get out of sometimes. And that's when you need your loved ones, those who stand by you, who understand your RSI. Like I'm so blessed that my partner, also has RSI in a way. So there's that mutual understanding. And there was a time where we were both kind of hooped, like we both ended up in a spiral at the same time. Usually we're there to pump each other up, and it was awful. I mean, you have two people who are just normally so active, mentally, physically, and whatnot. And, we just both wanted to give up, and I know I go through phases where I really want to give up even now. But, that saying, this too shall pass. And you do. You wake up the next day and you go about your routine, and suddenly, oh, it doesn't hurt as bad to hold my toothbrush today. Oh, I can lift this cup almost with one hand, right? So you start to see the little things again, and it's like you've got to cling to those little things, I think, and then you start climbing out of that hole of beating yourself up and depression, and because all those negative thoughts just make everything worse. Totally. My partner says that all the time and
Yeah.
has to remind me of that. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's helped me the most is meditation.
Mm.
And it's helped with so many things, but it helps you put things in perspective. It helps you sit with your emotions so that if you're angry, you're not flying off the handle with other people, but you're able to work it out in meditation. And I really highly recommend it. It's really worthwhile. And a lot of people say, I can't meditate, but that's kind of what it is. But if you just sit quietly and contemplate or just watch your thoughts, it can be very illuminative and really helpful. These calming practices. I teach when I'm working with clients, I teach them an exercise program to strengthen their posture. And this is interesting. The strength training is what makes the pain go away, because people don't understand that weakness can cause as much, if not more, pain than anything. They think they're weak, so they start stretching, which is the wrong thing to do. But appropriate strength training, and I'm not talking about lifting weights, I'm talking about specialized exercises that take the hand out of it so you're not straining your hands, that I've developed a whole program about. That helps. Yoga, again, I teach yoga without hands, no down dogs, no cats, none of this stuff that's going to place strain on the hand, which is not a weight-bearing joint, by the way. And restorative yoga, which is the best kept secret in yoga, which is, the props are holding you in the position so that you can truly relax. And that's a wonderful practice if you can do it. Meditation is wonderful. Feldenkrais, which I also teach, can be wonderful in making you aware of things, improving things on a very deep kinetic level, and it can really transform your whole body. It's amazing work. So these are all things that not only help you physically, but once you get better physically, you start feeling better emotionally, because they really go together hand in hand. So I think one of the things, if we're going to leave people with things that they can do, actions that they can take to climb out of emotions that might be hard for them, is, really just even taking a walk is wonderful, because it gets the blood flowing, and that also helps reduce pain. It calms the brain because of the cross patterning that's going on, opposite arm and leg. So these things can all be really helpful, so that the emotions don't turn into this funnel that keeps spiraling you down. And, I don't want to leave anybody here thinking that you're going to be stuck with this, because I think people can get better, and considerably better with
especially if they catch it early enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? Like I know myself, I've scared enough of my friends that when they started to get the initial signs and they knew my story, they would do the right thing and they got better. It's when you reach the stages that we did. And I think that's the big issue, is that, 20, 30 years ago, I mean, the only thing I had was your book, Deborah. I mean, I had the worst medical care treatment options. And it was up to me to figure things out and make myself as good as I can be. But if I'd known when I had my initial signs, that would have been life-changing. I might still be fully functional, but we'll never
You have
know.
just segued perfectly to my next point, which is the preventive aspect of this. I have been waiting for 30 years for someone to get some political activism going and saying, hey, we can't just abandon injured workers. We have to prevent repetitive strain injury. How do we do that? Have a mass educational campaign. But an educational campaign isn't enough, because you need to change the shape of the tools. You can't have people bending their elbows and pronating their palms all day without risking a very bad injury in the upper extremity. You can't have people just making minute movements all day long. Even at a good ergonomic setup, it's too much for the human body. So I finally thought, well, I am one person, and let me just try this. So I wrote a petition, and I put it on change.org. I'll bring this up on the screen. And it's basically outlining what needs to happen if we're going to prevent this injury among people, just as Alexandria said, and I think Howard probably agrees too. We need to prevent this injury in people, because nobody thinks of it. Nobody thinks something's going to go wrong with their hands. They're just innocently doing their job, working at a computer, working at some other hand-intensive activity, and suddenly, things go south, and then they can't get any care, and then they quit or they get fired. So I would like to see a long-term study, because the people that I see, when you talk to physical therapists and doctors, a lot of times they say, oh, you'll be fine. You hear that a lot. People are very optimistic about people with RSI. Oh, well, we'll just do this and you'll be fine. But that's not what I hear. Because I'm wondering, what's happening? Because when I wrote my first book and, met people like Howard, I thought about them for years. And I thought, what's happening with this person who got injured editing videos, or this person who was, a sculptor and got injured? And what happened to this person who was working as a secretary and got injured? And what happened to that person? And what happened to that doctor who came to me, and he was still in medical school, and he actually gave a pint of blood in order to pay for his session with me? What happened to those people? I don't know what happened to those people. And I would like to see, over, 10 years, how does it go? Over 20 years, how does it go? Over 30 years, how does it go for people who were injured that long ago? And I think that people they kind of disappear from the radar. You don't necessarily hear from them. But I hope that anybody listening or watching in the replay does sign my petition. I'll leave a link in the description below, and I'll also put a little notice up, because we really need to prevent it. Howard, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I would say one thing, which is I think I was pretty lucky because of my age. There wasn't the computer revolution, because in college I typed.
Yes.
In the Navy I typed, and when I first started working for the government, we wrote everything. There were no personal computers, and one reason I think that your petition is excellent is I'm just concerned about the next generation. My 3-year-old, soon-to-be 3-year-old great nephew, Laser, was watching a cartoon like 150 times on a small little device. These kids are now using devices and watching videos and everything else, and using phones and texting. And I'm really concerned about the next generation. In other words, I didn't get injured into midlife when I ended up using these PCs. But I think this petition really encouraged people to realize you need to take preventative action, because, you don't want to see another generation be like us in terms of having carpal tunnel surgeries, or causing splint makers to make a lot of money, or hand surgeons, people like that. So I think that is really important, because I want my great nephew and my 2 great nieces, who are just wonderful kids, not to experience the kind of pain that I experience. And one thing too, I think you mentioned it, is that we have all different types of pain in our hands. We have stabbing, piercing. Oh God, it's just unbelievable. But I think, this kind of preventative action is really needed so that we don't have more victims.
Yes, and I appreciate everything you've said, Howard. I think that's a really good point that you've made for everything. Do you have anything to add, Alexandria?
No, I think, Howard said it quite well there. I don't. I was thinking about other things as well, but not as related. So sorry.
That's all right. Does anybody else have anything to add about this? I mean, we can always revisit these topics later, but I think we've kind of covered a lot here.
There was
read Deborah's books. That's my suggestion.
It is
and available on Amazon. But really, thanks to Deborah, in other words, without her books, I don't think I would have achieved, been able to work as long as I've been able to work so far.
I agree.
So,
Deborah
I really think that thing I encourage people, I'm a union rep, is if you have a occupational illness or something, read and learn as much about it as possible, period. And the worst thing that can happen is you're not going to work. If you do nothing, you're not going to work. So just learn. So
Yes.
read Deborah's books. That's my personal advice.
Thank you, Howard.
exactly. And it was a lot of the references you had in your books. So I was able to look at the information, the medical journals, and it was great. It was like a huge rabbit hole for me, because of course I wanted to understand what was going on and why it was happening. So I spent a lot of time reading and researching, because I was off work too. I think the only other thing I wanted to add was in your stage 1, desperation. Desperation can really lead to a lot of bad, stupid choices. At the time, someone had put out a foot mouse, and I thought, okay, this is going to help me use my computer. Oh my gosh, I ended up with foot and ankle problems as a result. So, watch the snake oil salesman, because there are a lot of gadgets and tools, and I've seen strange mice replacements that really will just invoke a lot of other issues with other parts of your body. So, you know, when you get that desperation, just take some deep breaths and research, and make sure whatever it is you're going to try and adopt in your life to combat or deal with RSI, that it does have value and it won't harm you. So don't just take one person's word for it. Ask Deborah. She'll know.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, there is one good foot pedal that I like. It's easier on the foot, but I agree. I mean, because a lot of people they tend to go to their end range and bomb and wail on stuff, and people might have an ankle weakness or something. So these tools, a lot of people say, well, just wait, the technology will solve everything. And I'm going, oh God. Someone wanted to do clicking with the eye, and I'm thinking, oh, please don't do that. I mean, I can't think of a worse nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
So it's just every new technological change can usher in a whole new series of injuries. I mean, the phone can be really hard.
Oh,
and here we've got someone else.
That's a great comment.
Wait a minute, let me show this. We got a comment coming in. I was using the computer video games. I didn't care when I started feeling pain. I didn't care as a freelance developer, I thought I fixed my ergonomics, everything would be okay. Yeah. Computer ergonomics is a big fiction because it doesn't cure RSI. It is somewhat helpful in avoiding injuries. It is somewhat helpful in helping people continue to work, but how is an external thing going to cure something that's in your tissues? It won't. So, yeah, good point. I hope that computer-aided AMI is getting good guidance and doing better.
Take breaks, lots of breaks,
and get into a really great physical therapy. It's not all equal. I mean, I get questions about that all the time. But anyway, I think we're just about at a good ending point.
I just want to just mention one thing real fast, which is soaking your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And in other words, I did that this morning, and your hands are what hurt.
Yeah, I think that, different things work for different people. And, everybody needs to find their own soothers and stuff. I know I've got mine. I did this wonderful one for forearms. I did a little video on that. But I find some movement, some stillness, walking, aerobic activity can be very helpful. And also just laying off. I mean, and that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get the blood going.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to put up this little thing. I hope everybody who's willing and up for it will sign the petition. Let me find it. There we go.
All right.
The RSI Bill of Rights. It's on the change.org, and I'll put a link down below. I'm grateful to everybody who has, oh, that is so sweet. Somebody just had a comment. You're welcome. I am very pleased, if anybody doesn't get injured or, and just don't lose hope. Don't give up. Keep going. One foot after the other, because you can get better. Just keep going. All right, then. So I want to thank Howard and Alexandria, who have been great friends of the channel and great to the people that they're helping. Howard as a union rep and long-term RSI person, and Alexandria, she's excellent with speech technology, Dragon, and that can be a real lifesaver. I use it all the time. So I'll put her information up too, so that if you need to if you need to use the dragon, you'll be doing that. So anyway, thank you for coming today. This will be in the replay, and I hope to see you all next time.
Bye.
Thank you.